Hello everyone, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Thank you for joining me in my little corner of the internet where I talk all things planners, fountain pens, and fountain pen inks. And today I wanted to do something a little different, and I feel like I've been approaching these types of videos in the last couple of months here about how to really appreciate your collection. But today's video is talking about how I use my pens and inks, because you get a fountain pen, you're like, well, now what? What do I use these for? And I know that there are some people who are like, I just journal with my pens, or I just write work notes with my pens. What else could I be doing with my pens and inks? And I'm going to share all the different ways that I use my pens and inks and how I can get through, there's only 10 here, 12 the 12 pen and ink rotation every month and still feel like I'm giving equal opportunity to each of these. Now, these are only the ways that I use my pens and inks, but I'm sure there are so many other ways that I'm not including in this video. Please feel free to leave your suggestions or your ways that you use your pens and inks down below in the comments. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. The first way that I use my pens and inks is more of a functional purpose. I use them in my planner. So I have here the Traveler's Notebook monthly calendar, and I use this for actually planning out my YouTube content. And I actually write in this with my fountain pens. There isn't any rhyme or reason as to which pens I use, and I don't really decorate this. It's really a functional planner, but if I have the opportunity to use a fountain pen in any notebook or planner, I will. So that is one place that I am using my fountain pens and inks, is in this Traveler's Notebook monthly planner. But then that leads me to this planner. This is my passport notebook from Planner Monkey Co. that I have converted into my own weekly planner. And I use fountain pens in this. This has Tomoe River paper, and I'm not exactly sure of which batch, but when I chose a planner, I wanted to make sure that it was one that was fountain pen friendly. And this Tomoe River paper is, I say, mostly fountain pen friendly. There are some inks that still bleed through or shadow, but it doesn't bother me too much. But every week I decorate this, and then I actually use my little cheat sheet notebook. So this is my Hobonichi A6 notebook that has a list of all of my pens and inks in here. And I try to match up what stickers I'm using with what inks I have. So that's how I determine what I'm going to use every week. But also, it's just such a fun way to be able to use your pens and inks. If you're using different colored stickers every week, then you can use a pen and ink to match that. But also, I just have way more fun using pens and inks in my planner versus what I used to use, which was just a, black gel pen. And what else was I using? I was using Tombow markers, and Tombow markers were fun, but I found that my writing is so small, and I really enjoy the very tiny and very fine lines of extra fine nibs. And there's basically certain inks that with fountain pen inks, I'm just glad I have the opportunity to use them even with extra fine or very, very fine nibs, whereas I think Tombow markers, they're so broad for me that I can't really use them in a planner setting. And some gel pens I feel like are very broad for me as well. So fountain pens are perfect for me when it comes to my everyday planning. So that is the first way I use my pens and inks, is in my daily planning. Another way that I use my pens and inks is actually for work. So for work, I have a Hobonichi A5 notebook, and I just take notes in here about what my schedule is on a day-to-day basis, as well as all of the calls that I've taken, or any notes that I need to make, or any follow-ups that I need to make. So nothing too pretty. I just try to rotate between all of the different inks that I'm using on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that every pen gets at least 2 turns a month in here, depending on how many pens I have inked up. And it's just a fun way to turn something functional into something that I can still use my pens and inks for. Now, like I said, this is a Hobonichi A5 notebook, and this has Tomoe River paper, so very fountain pen friendly. This cover is from Bujo Planner as well. So I wanted to make something as functional as work notes be fun, and that's how I'm also using my pens and inks at work. Although I say at work, but I work from home, so it's not like I have to bring my pens and inks with me. They're literally on the desk right behind my work desk. So I know for some people it's a little bit more difficult to be able to bring your pens and inks to work, especially if you have some higher price pens that you don't want to risk getting lost or getting broken. So I have a special case where I have access to all of my pens from where I work because I work from home. So it's on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, that's another way I use my pens and inks. Another way I use my pens and inks, and this is the main one for me really, is journaling. I have two journals here. I have my A5 journal, and this is a Planner Monkey Co. notebook with Tomoe River paper. And I have two A5 notebooks that I use throughout the year, so January to June and then July to December. And what I do is, let me find a particular one here. So basically what I do with this journal is, for the 2 pages, this is for one day, and I split it into 4 different quadrants, and then each quadrant is basically 1 year. So every week I decorate my journal, and then I try to use or choose a pen and ink combination that's going to match the stickers. And that's where this handy dandy guide comes into play. I'm able to reference my pens and inks really quickly and then decide which one is going to match the best out of all the ones that I have currently inked. So this is one of the ways that I really use my pens and inks. And I try to make sure that every pen that is inked for the month has at least 2 or 3 times that I've used it in a journal entry. But for me, the key thing is that I love Tomoe River paper, and this notebook is Tomoe River paper, as well as my 5-year journal. This is the Hobonichi A6 5-year journal. I'm on the 5th year of it, and this has, I believe, the old Tamagawa Tomoe River paper, and still works absolutely beautifully. What I love about this is that I use a different pen and ink combination every month, and I keep track of those pen and ink combinations in the back here, so I can see exactly which pen and which ink I've used, and I switch them every month so that you'll be able to see all of the different gradients of ink that I've used. I feel like that one is Wearing Goal. What is that one? Wearing Goal, the Star Child. Oh, I can tell. It's so interesting looking through these and also looking at the pens that I've used over time, because you can tell what's been added to my collection, what's new to my collection, and also what has left my collection since then. So not just a timeline of what we did on a day-to-day basis over those years, but also a timeline of what I had in my collection, which I really like. So again, another way that I am using my pens and inks is through journaling, but also importantly in my Hobonichi A6 5-year journal, keeping track of what was inked, which I think is almost as important as journaling itself, is knowing what my preferences were and what was inked back then. Another way that I use my pens and inks, and I need to get better at this actually, is through pen pals and letter writing. I have some amazing friends who send me some happy mail, and I always get such joy being able to read it, but also how they include what pen and ink combination they used. I love that. And also just looking at people's penmanship and how different, but also like some similar properties of people's handwriting like across the country or across North America or across the world really. But I find it so, there's something so satisfying about being able to write a letter with a fountain pen, but also to write it on different types of paper. Now, I have some letters that I do need to reply to, and I have to admit that I'm not as good with replying. I don't know what it is. It's like I say to myself, I'm going to reply, and then I put it to the side and put it to my pile of reply, and then the task just seems bigger and bigger and bigger the longer that I put it off. And I really just need to find a good couple of hours to write out my replies using my lovely paper and lovely pens, and then just drop it off at the post office. But again, another way of using pens and inks is just to use the beautiful inks and pens by writing letters to other friends. And I think one of the great things about the fountain pen hobby is that I've been able to find other people within this community that have been so willing to send happy mail as well. If you're looking for other fountain pen friends who you want to send mail to, I highly recommend joining Discord communities or Slack communities, like Simona or Simone has a Slack community. Discord community, and then Atlas also has a Discord community. I think Esterbrook also has one, and there's also other people who individually have their own. So I recommend joining those so that you can meet other people. And also there are forums or boards that have Happy Mail signups that you could sign up to exchange mail with other people. So highly recommend that. And another way to use your fountain pens and inks. Another fun way that I love to use my pens and inks, and this might be a little bit extra for some people, is really to keep track of what I've acquired, but then also doing some fun ink explorations like this to find a good pen and ink pairing. So putting splatters on a sheet like this and then being able to compare it to a specific pen and seeing what will match. But it's also just fun to play with your art supplies, play with your fountain pen ink in ways that aren't just writing in your journal, because we have so much ink that we're not really going to be able to use in our lifetime. So why not play with it? Have some inky messes. I know one of my friends, Simona or Simone, she does wonderful inky messes on her channel. I also recommend Gourmet Pens, does great things with her inks, and it's just such a great way to play with fountain pens as a medium in that way, and kind of get out of your head of what you can and can't do with fountain pen inks. So playing with your inks using, what do I use? I use a sandwich bag to create these swatches. Paint with your inks. I'll show you what I do with my inks when I'm painting with them. Or you can doodle with inks as well. So I'll show you one of the other things that I do with my inks is my monthly doodles. So I have doodles that I do every month, and there's just something so satisfying about being able to pick up your pen and use it in a different way other than just writing. I also find that by doodling, I'm able to use the pen in more than just writing letters, but I'm able to see the shading characteristics or the shimmer characteristics of an ink more so in a doodle than I would in a writing sample. So that is another way that I am using my pens and inks. One other way that I also use my inks is painting with them, and I know that there's so many who are amazing artists, like my friend from Corolla. She paints these beautiful florals with fountain pen inks, and I actually used to, when I had my sticker shop, I would paint all of the illustrations using fountain pen ink, and I haven't done that in a while, but what I'm doing now is just painting my roses for all of my currently inked in my Me Plus planner. This is the passport size, and that way I get to have a page of each one. So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to paint one of my roses. So I'm currently painting with Diamine Blush, which is inked in my Leonardo Memento Zero Grande 2.0. And I'm just painting a loose floral, a loose rose. These are essentially C curves that also have different pressure points in there to get the variations in the petals. So starting in the center and then working your way out, and starting with light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, heavy pressure, and then ending with very light pressure so that you get that point. And doing the same on this side. And one of the things definitely with painting with fountain pen ink is that it's going to behave differently than watercolor because they are two very different mediums. So I did a lot of my tutorials following watercolor artists, but knowing I had to adjust some of what I was doing based on the properties of the fountain pen ink and the paper that I was working with, because it was also specific to paper. Because if I'm using Tomoe River paper, for example, the effect you're going to see is going to be different than if you're just using watercolor paper. Love that. I love the ragged edges of this too. So then I'm going to do a smaller rose down here. Now, suffice it to say, you don't have to do this. with your pens and inks. I do this because I enjoy this. I enjoy the process, but also I love being able to use my pens and inks in all of these different ways. But if you're happy with the way that you're using your pens and you don't want to add anything more, don't add anything more. The whole point of this video is to share what I currently do, and if that sparks some interest in you to start something new, great. But if you're happy with the way that you're appreciating your pens and inks, then that's also absolutely amazing. Do what works for you. And what I love about painting as well is that you can really see the shading properties of the inks. So now that that's done, I'm going to write the name of the ink down here. So we have Diamine Blush. Lovely. So that is another way that I am using my pens and inks. So there you have it, all the different ways that I use my pens and inks. I use that in my planner, I use them in my journal, I use them in my work notes. I do lovely ink art with them or have fun inky messes with them. I do paper swatches with them to look at the different properties across different papers. I do doodles, and I also do paintings. And when I do get to it, I also use them to write letters. So those are all the different ways that I use my pens and inks, and I'm hoping that this video will help inspire you to find another way to use your pens and inks, or at least help you understand why I do all of this. This is not something that's necessary to be part of the fountain pen or fountain pen ink hobby. These are just things that I like to do with the pens and inks because of the fact that I have so many, and this is just one way that I like to enjoy my pens and inks. There's no one right way to enjoy your pens and inks, and that's the beauty of this hobby, because we can all be part of it and we can all enjoy pens and inks in our own way, regardless of whether we understand why somebody else does what they do. Whew. All right, that is it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know down below. Otherwise, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and have yourselves a great day.